Hey, welcome to Lesson 3, HTML, CSS, and Scripting. Now, this is where we'll actually start to get into the meat and potatoes of things. We're not going to cover how to program in HTML, and it's just a hypertext markup language, or how to program in CSS, although I will show you some of this so I know what I'm talking about. But this is just to introduce you to it so that you know what you're looking at when you're actually building something inside of a builder in WordPress, for example, or using Drupal or some other system. This way you know what the foundation is, okay? So let's get started, okay? So I've got a couple things open here. I got this document, this editor, and Google, and another page, and I'll share this other page in a moment. Now this document I'm going to share with you, basically this explains what HTML is. It's hypertext markup language. Okay, the thing to understand is that hypertext markup language is only used to construct basic presentation of website data. So when you see a website, that data is usually in hypertext markup language. In fact, it almost always is. And it's manipulated by cascading style sheets, okay? Which is right here, CSS, okay? So between HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, that makes up probably about 85% of a website in terms of code totality and foundation, okay? So the thing to understand about HTML is it's not a full-blown language, okay? It's the name implies it's a markup language, okay? So it doesn't process any logic. It doesn't make any decisions for you. It doesn't do any server-side processing, although it can when it's used in SHTML, which is includes server-side includes in HTML, but for more about that later. It also could be covered in the variations here, but I decided not to cover it. There's just too many. But there are variations of HTML, for example, dynamic HTML, DHTML, or XHTML, extensible hypertext markup language. Now, the only thing you need to know is what HTML is and what it looks like, okay? Now, hypertext markup language is simple, really. If we view the page source of any page, you're pretty much looking at, in 99% of cases, hypertext markup language, okay? Now, in this case, a lot of the stuff we're looking at here is JavaScript, and you have to sort of discern where the code is. But if you look at these tags like divs here, those stand for divisions. You can see that the site is made up of many divs here, and then those divs are sort of designed through cascading style sheets. You'll notice this script tag too here, because everything in here is scripting, okay, JavaScript. So that said, I have this W3 Schools Triad editor open so we can sort of look and see what HTML is. Now, if you look at this doc type declaration, it tells you that it's HTML. And the reason why most documents do that nowadays is so that things don't enter into what we call quirks mode, or switch from a browser rendering it in basic HTML to any other mode, for that matter. So we're going to use this real-time sort of renderer here to show you what HTML and CSS do and how they interact, okay, and why it's important. When you're building something in WordPress Builder, for example, you'll assign a page title, for example, okay? We'll go, this is my page, okay? And then we're just going to run it as we go along, okay? So now the page of the title of the page is this is my page. Now this first heading, let's change this to something else, okay? We're going to change it to, we're going to edit this, exclamation point, okay? Run it. And you'll see this changes in real time here, okay? Now this is hypertext markup language. This is how your browser is interpreting this, okay? And each browser, believe it or not, for the longest time, interpreted each one greatly differently in many ways, okay? For example, one would interpret a P tag differently than another one would interpret a P tag, which stands for paragraph. Or some have ridiculous tags that you probably shouldn't use. Example, blink. Which of course makes something blink, and in some browsers opted to not even render the blink because they just don't support it. So we're not going to go through all the tags and what they are in support, but you can look up and see what browsers support which tags. So in this case, we're just showing you that this is what every page looks like underneath, okay? This is what the meat and potatoes of a page looks like, as you can see here. For example, if we let's go to test.com, okay? And if it will pull up quickly, which it doesn't seem to be going, okay? So let's go to bing.com, okay? There we go. And so if we were to view the page source of this, you'll see that it's also HTML, okay? And it's got heading and meta, which are all different tags to describe different functions of a web page. But for now, we're just looking at the HTML, okay? And if you look, here's more divs, okay? And if you look closely at this div, for example, look at this here, you'll see that it has an ID and a class. And that brings us to styling via cascading style sheets, okay? You can target either an ID or a class of an element, or create and assign those classes and IDs so that you can manipulate the way they look. So let's see what that looks like. Go back to if I go back to our document here, there we go, the last one I grabbed, of course. Now, let's say we want to edit this heading 1, okay? We want this to be blue, okay? There's many ways to achieve this. We can assign this a class, we can assign an ID, and then manipulate that CSS via CSS in the document somewhere else, or we can do it what's called inline, okay? So for now, we're just going to start inline. And to do that, we just create what's called a style, okay? And then so I happen to know that, okay, we can just go color blue, okay? Run this and you'll see that your heading has indeed become blue, okay? Now this is styling it inline. This is good for small snippets, okay? If you want to do just small, a single color or some padding or something like that. Now, if we have a whole extensive range of stuff that we want to apply to this, let's give this an ID. We call this HCID equals test1, okay? So then what I can do is come up to the head of my document, okay? And you could do, it doesn't have to be in the head, it could be in the body of the document too. That changes where it renders, but again, another lesson for another time. For now, we'll just put it here. So we got style. Now, it used to be you have to declare the type too, and we'll just go ahead and do that, okay? Style type equals text CSS. That way the browser knows what it's looking at. But nowadays, you don't have to put this anymore because the browser knows, okay? So what we want to do is create an ID. Now, when you're creating ID, you use the pound sign. Test1, okay? Then we open up our CSS and close it with curly brackets, okay? Now we're ready. This test1, anything we apply to this ID, which is designated by the pound sign, will apply to this here. So let's do a couple things before I hit run. We're going to create a border, 1px solid. We'll call it orange, okay? And then we're going to go background, color, yellow. We're going to make this look crazy. Add a little padding to the whole document, to the whole H1 document, that is. Padding, we'll go 20 pixels, okay? And let's run this. So there we go. There you have, I applied this style to this ID here. Now what happens if I remove one of the letters? You'll see. It's not going to work because the ID, it doesn't match anything, okay? So we'll put that back. Actually, let's remove the ID. We'll remove it from here. Run again, nothing, right? So now let's assign this a class, okay? Class is a way of doing it in multiple locations, whereas an ID you only really want semantically one ID per page, okay? So let's just say the class, we want to call it heading main, and we have heading main across 50 pages on a site. You can see why this becomes very helpful, because then you can apply this heading main to 50 pages at the same time. So now in order to do this, we use a period, okay? Heading dash main, okay? Now if I run this, you'll see it's applied to this as well. Now let's see why that's useful. If I go to, let's move this heading down and create a copy. Okay, I'm going to Control C, Control V that. All right, so I've created the second one. You can see by adding this class, I have the same applied styles. Now, the nice thing about this, it doesn't even have to be a heading. It could be a div, okay? And it's going to take that div and apply it to now. That's why the style of the size changed, because we're dealing with heading and not just regular text inside of a div tag. Okay, so this is all HTML, and then this is the CSS that's getting applied. Now you can see how easy it is to keep the separation of your design and your page flow by doing it this way. Okay, this is why many times, you know, the style sheet will be externally referenced. So for example, you won't even see it in the header here. The style sheet will be called, you know, let's look at one, for example, here. Let's see if we can find a .css file. Okay, and you can see here, for example, styles, and they're loading this through a method of JSON here. We'll talk more about that later, but a JavaScript object notation. And this is the path. So this is telling me that there's a CSS file that's being referenced that lives here. Okay, so you can call those via document. So if I was to paste this in there, there we go. Well, we're blocked from seeing it because it doesn't exist, it says. So let me just make sure I got it right. I might not have pasted it. Looks like I'm missing my HTTP there. Nope. Okay. For some reason, whatever I'm copying and pasting doesn't exist. So let's try and find another one, because I don't want to leave you here with a dissatisfying taste. And of course, I'm not going to be able to find an external. Okay, let's do this. Let's go to webmaster.company, okay? And let's view the page source. And we'll type, let's look for a CSS file. And you can see here, it's linking rel equals style sheet, and it's telling me it wants to link to a CSS file. Okay. Now, if I click on that, you'll see this CSS file is for the dash icons, but it's basically externally designing all those elements without having to put all that code in line. Go here, for example. All this code I added here without putting it in line. So anywhere I reference client heading throughout the site, it takes on those features, okay? So now the purpose of this, and the reason why we showed you this, and the reason why I'm showing you this, is so that you can see that the presentation and value of this is still stored in HTML, but it's being cleaned up and beautified by cascading style sheets, okay? So let's go down to our document here a little bit further. And as you can see, I've referenced everything in here, showed you the example ID, showed you the example class, and how to beautify those inside of a document. Now you can use this editor here yourself. I'll make sure to link that in the document in the code as well, so that you can sit in here, you could run in real time and sort of mess with this. Now this is just, again, very rudimentary foundational stuff, but this is going to be important for when we get into our lessons later. When I say big words, you already know what those mean, and you have something to reference back to in case you need it and you're starting out just at the ground up. All right, thanks.